Are you looking for some examples of notes to put in your Zettelkasten? Hi there, my name is Brian Collins. Welcome to the Become a Writer Today channel. So I've been keeping a Zettelkasten for a couple of years now, and I have thousands of different types of notes. Some of them are short, some of them are long. Some of them follow a specific format, others don't. In this video, I'm going to profile the different types of notes that I'm currently keeping inside of my Zettelkasten. And of course, please remember, there is no one set rule or guiding principle for your Zettelkasten. It's basically just a system for having all of your notes and research in one place and then writing them and revising them in your own words. Now, I have other videos on the channel where I explain exactly how the Zettelkasten system works. So in this video, I'm just going to focus on giving you some examples that you can use, which will hopefully help you build your personal Zettelkasten. A fleeting note is basically a short note. It describes something interesting that you think about, read, listen to, watch, or come across. It doesn't have to make much sense. Your job is simply to get the idea out of your head and into your note-taking app so you can refine it and rewrite it later. So as an example, I was reading the book The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, which is a book on creativity. And he describes a concept known as demoitis. Demoitis basically describes when an artist listens to a mixed or finished version but prefers the original demo, and it can cause a bit of problems with procrastination and so on. So because I'm not a musician, I wasn't too familiar with this concept, so I simply gave the note the headline demoitis. I referenced Rick Rubin because I'm reading this book at the moment, and then I gave myself a little note about where I could find a particular section. So later on, I'll review this short form note and I'll rewrite these sections with perhaps a quote from Rick and some examples of demoitis. And sometimes I'll add a hashtag if I have time. It really depends on where I'm taking the short form note. For example, am I taking it on my phone while I'm waiting for an appointment or while I've parked the car? Or am I taking it with my computer when I can write into the note a little bit more? The point is, this is a fleeting note that I will since build on or rewrite later. Each week, I like to review what I've worked on, what I've written, and what I've done in my business. It's a good concept for creatives and for anybody who, I suppose, wants to accomplish more, and also for self-reflection. You can use a template to help with your weekly review process. Obsidian, which is the note-taking app that I use for my Zettelkasten, has a plugin that will provide a template a little bit like this. Now, I've customized it slightly, so it has the headline weekly review template. It has a short section where I can write a reflection on what I did. Then it has a headline about some projects that I've worked on related to my business, to an NFT website that I'm working on, and to also some training that I'm doing for a triathlon. Then it has some questions where I'll ask myself what worked, what didn't work, and what can I fix. It'll also have a stop, start, continue list. So this will just simply be a bullet point of things to stop doing, to start doing, and to continue doing. 3 to 4 focus areas for the following week, and also just a bullet point about each day about something I could focus on. Now, I don't spend too long going through all of these questions. They're simply bullet points that I'll answer. It'll take about 15 to 30 minutes, and I usually do it on a Friday afternoon or on a Sunday. Here's what a finished version looks like. Here's a weekly review that I completed based on this template. Firstly, I said it wasn't a very productive week. Not every week is. It was a 4-day week because it was a bank holiday in Ireland. I had to take some time off for family reasons, and I also had a migraine, so I lost a half a day's work. And I also had to take some time off due to an issue with my car. So it was a 2-day week. So in terms of what did I accomplish? Well, I wrote down that I bought some shares on behalf of the business. I worked on content briefs and outsourcing with writers. I worked on some edits for articles. I reviewed a traffic dip to one of the websites that I'm working on. I described some work I did for a voluntary role for a local sports club. And then I just put down some bullet points about the training plan that I'm following for a triathlon and how I did a 3x4 mile run, and I was tired after that. Then I explained what worked. So I made some progress with videos for this channel. And then I also wrote some scripts for next week. And then I also described what didn't work. So although I'm ahead with these videos, I didn't actually record as many as I would have liked to, thanks to it not being a very productive week. And I also described how I need to fix a content strategy for a site that's experiencing a content dip. And then I have a stop, start, continue list where I describe an SEO strategy that I'm going to stop following. Some projects that I want to start focusing on, including restarting a podcast, and also how I want to continue tracking or continue focusing on video for the time being. And finally, I set a priority for the following week. and then I mapped out what I'm going to focus on each day. So again, as you can see, these are bullet points. It only takes a few minutes to complete, but it does help me get a bit of clarity about the week ahead. The next type of note you may want to take could include taking interesting sections or passages from articles or books that you read that relate to a specific topic. As an example, I recently read the book Small Giants by Bo Burlingham, and it's all about how businesses can deliberately stay small to serve their customers. Now, there were a couple of points in this book about how business is a type of creative work. So I pulled out all of the quotes that relate to this single theme and I pasted them into this single note. Now, what I may potentially do later is break these out into individual or smaller notes, or alternatively rewrite this as an article. But because I have the quotes and I have a short reaction at the top of the note and the page numbers, it's easy for me to find these later on. And I've also linked to an index note, and I'm going to show you an example of an index note in a moment, of all of the notes that I've taken from this particular book. So if you find it too granular to take notes about a specific topic, you can actually use the Readwise plugin to sync notes or Kindle highlights directly to Obsidian. A bit more of an advanced strategy, but it can save you a little bit of time if you set it up. So as an example, I recently read the book Mind Management, Not Time Management by David Kadovy. I also interviewed him for the Become a Writer Today podcast, so go check out that interview if you're interested. And basically, these are the key highlights from this book, and I just underlined them with my Kindle while I was reading it. And because Readwise is connected to Obsidian, it will automatically pull through all of these quotes. Now, if I'm working on a different note related to creativity or the Zettelkasten system or mind management, I can quickly search for this index note and start pulling out interesting quotes. And I can also click on any of these links and it will automatically open up the location on my Kindle and also on Readwise, assuming that I have the book downloaded to the Kindle app. Or alternatively, I can just view them on Readwise. But again, this is a great way of getting information that you come across in books into your Zettelkasten. A different type of note you may want to take for your Zettelkasten is a Zettel note. So a Zettel note is basically a note that indexes all of the child notes on a particular topic. So as an example, I recently took a meditation course using the app Waking Up, and I learned about the concept of using koans as a meditation practice. And it actually prompted me to go away and read some books and poetry all about koans. Now, I captured all of the koans that I came across on the course and in these books. So if I click on this particular koan here, Wash Your Bowl, it has a summary of what the koan is about and how to apply it. It has a quote that I came across about this koan from a book, and it also has the two sources for the koan itself and also for the quote. And then it links back to the index note. And I've also included 2 hashtags. So in summary, if I was to search for koans inside of my Zettelkasten, this will be another way for me to find all of the child or atomic notes on the topic. Here's an example of a shorter note that I turned into a longer note. Basically, I read a book about the Confucian Analects, and I took a short note about some ideas I came across in this book. I gave it a descriptive heading, so on the Confucian Analects, so basically on and then whatever the topic is. I then summarized what this is in my own words, so I'm a bit more familiar with the concept. I usually like to put this in italics, so I know it's my summary and not from the book. I then had a couple of bullet points that go into some detail. Now, arguably, I could have rewritten these into a couple of paragraphs. I have some notes about when I read the book, what I thought about it, and so on. And then I've also linked to some other books and readings or writings that I came across on a similar topic, including a book by Ray Dalio. And I've also linked to some smaller notes about the Confucian Analects inside of my Zettelkasten. And then I have an instruction here that I should also create a similar note like this about the concept of Taoism, and I have a link to an external resource and 3 relevant hashtags. So I suppose if I wanted to write an article at some point, I could flesh out any of these bullet points. I could flesh out these child notes, or I could write another note about Taoism and interlink the 2 different ideas. So again, it's a good example of how I'm taking a fleeting note and turning it into something longer that's in my own words and that also has indications about what next steps are. Here's an example of a more fully fledged note. You may be familiar with the concept of 1,000 true fans proposed by Kevin Kelly approximately 10 years ago. Well, there's a new concept about how you can have 100 true fans if you want to build a thriving internet business. So I've given it a descriptive headline, summarized it in my own idea, written a reaction about what I need to learn about next, taken a quote from the article, linked to the source, and also linked to a couple of other notes I have on this topic. And then also written a follow-on prompt that I could potentially explore, and finally 3 relevant hashtags. Sometimes I will take a longer note inside of my Zettelkasten and turn it into a fully fledged article. Now I have another video on the channel where I do a deep dive into my workflow for doing just that. But suffice to say, this is an example. I had a short note about the types of generative art. I then rewrote this short or fleeting note several times before breaking it out into a longer article about 8 types of generative art with examples. And basically I was able to combine a multitude of shorter notes into one long article that I could publish on my site. And that's the beauty of the Zettelkasten method. It's that you're never sitting down to write something from scratch. Instead, you're taking your short notes and perhaps your slightly longer notes and revising them and rewriting them and summarizing them in your own words. And you'll gradually build something that you can later publish or that you can use. I'm currently trying to build the Become a Writer Today YouTube channel, and I've experimented with scripting videos versus using bullet point outlines. So right now I'm using this template to plan a video. So it will prompt me to write the title for the video before I record it. So that'll give me a constraint within which to work. Then it'll prompt me to come up with a hook or an idea for the video that makes it interesting. Some notes about the thumbnail and the key topics to cover and what I should have on the end screen. And I find having this little template does save me a little bit more time than just trying to come up with a video idea from scratch. So here's a roughly completed version of that template. So I've come up with a title for the YouTube video. Now I would usually write 4 or 5 titles instead of 1. I have a hook that I'll mention in the introduction. So basically it can be hard to know what to capture inside of your Zettelkasten, but you can't actually break the system. I have some initial ideas for a thumbnail that I could give to a designer, and then I have an outline of some of the notes that I'm going to cover inside of the video. And often this is enough for me to get started. There are multiple schools of thought about the best way to name your notes inside of your Zettelkasten. So you can use a numeric based system. Personally, I prefer to use headlines or headings that make sense at a glance. So sometimes it'll be a prompt or sometimes it'll be a reminder. So in this case, it says art demands patience. So I'll immediately know on reading this note that it's about these 2 topics. In other cases, I'll simply pick a topic like the narrative fallacy and then prefix it with on. So in other words, if I want to capture a note about a topic, I'll just say on, then whatever the topic is, and then start to summarize it in my own ideas. Or I may potentially interlink different topics in a short form or fleeting note and then go back and change the heading for the note later on. In other cases, the note could actually be a commandment to myself or a prompt to myself. So allow room for error. There's actually a typo here. So allow room for error. And then I'll provide some context about how it's best to be conservative about the best possible outcome and more optimistic about the worst. And then I have a link to where I came across this idea. So this is quite helpful because I can use the sidebar on the left-hand side of Obsidian or whatever my Zettelkasten app is, and I can quickly scan through the titles for the notes to find something. You can also use your Zettelkasten for planning interviews. I run a podcast and sometimes I'll do this. So I'll put in the interviewee name, the date of when the interview is taking place, some brief notes about the interviewee, a couple of bullet points, and then some potential questions to ask them as well. And I may also link to some articles that they've written too, and also include a hashtag so I can find this note more easily. Now sometimes I'll tidy up this note before the interview, but in this case I was a bit short on time, so this was just simply enough for me to refer to before the actual interviewee logged in. Here's another example. So it's a bit more organized. So I've explained who the interviewee is, and I've outlined a couple of different questions, and then I have his bio at the bottom of these questions. Now it's missing the link, but sometimes I will add links to their personal website and so on. You can put images into your Zettelkasten too. Here's a cross photo of me. A few weeks ago, I was away at a fancy hotel in Northern Ireland, and I was struck by an interesting picture I saw in the bar of some middle-aged guys, I guess like me, except it was in the 1920s. And they've lined up some fish that they caught, which they won an award for, and got a picture of themselves taken as well. Now, I was struck by this because I enjoy long distance running, and often runners will take pictures of themselves for Strava and for social media with their medals. So it struck me as an interesting example of how we all like to be seen and we all like to mark our achievements. And perhaps there's some analogy I could draw between these guys here and what it's like to finish a marathon. Now, whether I'll actually do that or not, who knows? But this picture serves as a type of writing prompt for that article, if I ever write it, or for that video, should I ever decide to record it. I tend to keep a lot of lists inside of the Zettelkasten, or sometimes a lot of bullet point lists. As an example, I recently read a book about neural linguistic programming, or NLP. So I basically captured some prompts and exercises that I got from this book in the form of a list. So this isn't something that I'm going to write about, but it's just something that I'd like to refer to if I want to, I suppose, practice one of these exercises. I'll also sometimes use the Zettelkasten to quickly plan ideas in the form of bullet points rather than writing, hundreds or thousands of words on a particular topic. So as an example, at one point I'd created an author website and I identified potential audiences to focus on for this site. So I came up with some general audiences, niche audiences, and some company and industries to look at. And again, this is just my way of quickly mind mapping or exploring what I'd like to write about based on some ideas that are inside of my head. So again, this isn't something that I'm going to turn into a public facing work. It was more just a way of quickly capturing ideas without actually laboring over writing long sentences or paragraphs. I sometimes like to keep questions and prompts for myself as part of a weekly or monthly review. Here's an example. So every 2 or 3 months, I like to review what worked and what didn't work. And I may potentially journal about it. So these are some questions that I could ask in my journal. But rather than opening them up and trying to figure out what to write about or what's going wrong, I could refer to a list like this and use these as a form of writing prompts. And I've also explained where I got some of these from via the sources at the bottom of the note. You can also create outlines for articles that you write regularly. As an example, I'm currently writing a lot about NFT projects, and all of these articles follow a particular outline. So what I've done is created a template for these articles, and then when I'm writing an article about this particular topic, I'll just simply open up this template and it's almost like a fill in the blanks exercise. So if you find yourself writing about something regularly and the article follows a similar structure, then perhaps you can save that as a template. Sometimes I'll create a note inside of the Zettelkasten for projects. As an example, I've started a great books project where I want to read a set amount of books each month that are or regularly make the list of the best books of all time. So I've started tracking the books that I've read, books that I'd like to read, and also books that regularly make these lists. And then I have a couple of sources here below as well. So the idea is that I'll tick these off one by one as I've read them, and I'll also be able to quickly find books that I can read when I finish one of these. As you can see, the Zettelkasten is quite versatile. You can't break it. To summarize, you can use it to capture fleeting or short notes. You can then turn those into longer notes. You can also write notes for your projects like the one I had on screen a moment ago. You can use it to create templates for articles and for your writings. And you can even use it to write articles. You can have notes that summarize key ideas. You can have notes which serve as a type of prompt for something you need to do or remember. You can have notes about a specific topic. You can also have notes for things like a weekly review, for outlines, for podcasts, for interviews, and so on. And you can also have index notes whereby you summarize all of your notes on a specific topic. In other words, the Zettelkasten is something that grows organically. I did wonder about all of these types of notes when I started using my Zettelkasten, and it's only when you start putting more and more information inside of it that you will find something that works for you. So in short, don't obsess too much about it. Simply start by taking fleeting notes and then rewriting them and revising them in your own words. Are there any notes that you are keeping which I haven't covered? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe.